So I always enjoyed GTA games as a kid, always had a lot of fun just driving around in the game, shooting stuff, running from the police, running after the police, all of that. Never really got into the story too much. Maybe I was a bit young, didn't understand the language that well. I never really got that part out of it. But anyway, back to GTA 5. So recently, because I had some more time during the pandemic, I gave GTA 5 a try. Why not? And turned out it was a lot of fun actually. At first I just tried to fool around, drive around with a car, just maybe shooting stuff and stuff like that, so just classical having fun with it. But eventually I gave the story a try as well, and it turned out it was actually very interesting. It was a lot of fun, it was interesting, it was compelling, and what maybe really stand out to me the most was the cultural commentary that you can find in the game. It really impressed me a lot. I did not expect it, and it was fun. So I really felt like I want to, express myself and maybe give out my impressions, so what I got out of it and all of that. So maybe I would start with the characters. Are the three characters that are very interesting. So first we have Franklin. Franklin is an African American who is living in the ghetto with his aunt. He joined the gang as a teenager and has been doing small crimes since ever, just to get by. He calls it hustling. He's by no means a bad person. He's willing to help his friends out, for example. He's a smart guy. If he was born in better conditions and had some good education, he could have easily have gotten a very good career and he would be able to benefit the society. He always had ambitions to get out of the ghetto and make something good of himself. But, it never quite comes to that, so in the game he eventually meets other protagonists and goes for bigger crimes. The thing is, he doesn't do that because he would be a bad person, but he just sees that as a way to get out of the hood. The second main character we meet is Michael. Michael is a retired criminal. He's enjoying his retirement with a luxurious house in the rich part of the city. He has enough money to afford anything he wishes. He has a yacht, for example. That the other side, he has very bad relationship with his family. He argues constantly with his wife. She cheats on him with tennis coats, and she cheats back on her with hookers, and basically has a very horrible relationship in general. He has a daughter and a son, which he also has a problem with. They're both incredibly spoiled. His son spends most of his time just playing video games, smoking weed. His daughter is putting herself in harmful situations due to her craving to become a celebrity. So it's an interesting archetype of a character who's like a great satire of sort of like the upper class of America. So there are the incredibly rich people who basically have more than they would ever need, but they still find themselves unhappy.
Trees are a good substitute for not really knowing what the fuck you're doing on this earth.
Jesus, man. You a good time, you know that?
Finally, we get to meet Trevor. At first, to be honest, I didn't like the part of the game with Trevor. He just seems like a crazy guy, just mentally unstable, unhinged, violent guy. That's the first impression you get of him. So at first you just go around, fight other gangs, and you mostly see his aggression side. But as the game progresses, we also learn about his other side. So about his abusive childhood, his failure to become an Air Force pilot due to mental disability, and also some of the positive side. Like, he still is loyal to his friends, he still is caring to them when he's really attached to them. His character by himself represents sort of like the mentally unhinged part of America, if I say so. The child who is a result of a failed abusive parent and the inability of public institutions to provide him any kind of proper care. He's not a stupid person at all. He's a person who almost became an Air Force pilot. As the game goes on, his kind nature shines through more and more occasionally, but he's just unfortunately as a result of basically unaddressed mental problems that are combined with rampant substance abuse, and the result is, well, a disaster.
Yes, Mr. Chang, pleasure to meet you.
No, I am Mr. Chang's humble translator. Mr. Chang now.
我操他妈的，真是爽翻了！You speak
So overall, the three characters sort of represent the three major part of American society. Like Franklin is the impoverished minority population living in the poor part of the city. Michael is the upper white class suburban population who has no problem with money but still has their own mental and relationship problems, unhealthy lifestyle, substance abuse. Especially, I think maybe that his two children do a very good job of representing the younger generation of that population, that while they have all their material needs provided, their parents still completely failed in terms of parenting. So their interests and goals are just completely soaked up by the mainstream, which end up pretty toxic. So his son, for example, he's an interesting one in a way that the game sort of makes fun of its own audience. He's a fat gamer who has never had a job, he smokes weed, he eats pizza all day. His daughter is also interesting. She's a pretty girl who dreams of being a celebrity. She doesn't really lack anything, but what she has is not enough for her. She wants to have that mainstream ideal of being a famous celebrity, that everyone would talk about her. So she ends up singing for a TV competition in hope of getting her talent recognized. Of course, it's implied that she in truth has no talent, and the TV show would be just taking advantage of her upper failure, which is sort of like the reality, you know. The media gave her this impression that she just have to try and she's going to succeed, she's going to be this famous person. You know, while the reality is that most of the people who try to do this just fail miserably, to be honest. Maybe the next part I would touch upon is social commentary with money. It's a sort of a subtle but very interesting thing. I really liked how you make money in the game. So just like in older installments, you can try to make money in like completely honest ways. Like you can try driving a taxi, doing small favors for people. But sadly, the honest way is not a way to make any serious money. You would never be able to buy a house, for example, by driving a taxi. You would probably have to drive a taxi in for years to make enough money. Of course, in real life, you would probably need to drive it for a lifetime to, you know, get a house in a big city like that. I'm not sure how long you would need to do it in the game. But basically the point is you can't buy a house by driving a taxi. So the only way to make actual money, to be able to buy something concrete, you need to do crime in the game, like organized robbery that you do throughout the game. That's what actually gives you the big bucks, that enables you to get a business, for example, and that business will give you passive income, and you won't even need to work at some point after you do enough crime. You have enough businesses, and you can make that money completely legitimately by barely doing any work at all. But the genius thing is that you don't even make the main money by doing crime. The real money made in the game is by abusing the stock exchange system. So the game allows you to buy fictional stocks of fictional companies in-game, whatever they are, and basically sell them again once their value goes up. Like you can try just guessing how the value is going to be, but in the game you can manipulate the value of these stocks. For example, at one point you assassinate the CEO of Apple, for example, and after you do that, the value of the stock will plummet like to the ground. And because of that, the competitor stock value will rise dramatically. And basically, because you're the one doing the crime, you can speculate how your action will affect the value of the stock, and you can manipulate it, and you make basically a ton of money. And the real genius thing in the game, that's probably my favorite part of it, is that by doing this, you make the most money. You make way more money than you ever would robbing a bank or whatever you would do. And I think this is like sort of the genius thing that they pointed out, because maybe like in mainstream media, for example, the robber will always rob the bank and they will make a lot of money by robbing the bank. But it's not really like that in real life. So the way you make money in real life is by legal means, manipulating stock markets, for example. That's the way to actually do it.
It's called capitalism.
So the next part was also genius. is the corporate culture and work in general. One aspect that it parodies is social media and corporate greed. For example, we have a fictional company, iFruit, that represents the smartphone giant Apple, and then we have a parody of Facebook. So in the game commercials, the game will constantly poke fun of the fact that Facebook steals personal data. In the campaign, you have a parody of greedy modern CEO of this company, Life Invader, who's like a parody of Steve Jobs and Zuckerberg, for example. So a really good part of the game is when a protagonist will try to sneak inside an office of Apple, or the parody of it, or whatever. And it's like a really cool parody of corporate culture once you do that, if you look at it carefully. So for example, the office that you see, the office is a modern open office. It has like beanie bags, it has video games, trendy artwork everywhere. Employers will play air guitar to have fun while at work, for example. Might look like a cool place to work at first glance. But there's a couple of hints that show you the true nature of the workplace that they're in. So for example, just before you go inside, you can have a short conversation with an employee who pretty much expresses that they're overworking them. He's not able to deliver quality work on time, so they deliver shit work to customers, for example. And if the players is following slowly, one of his lines is, "Oh, they're threatening us to outsource my job to Guam," and the true nature will really show up.
Concentrate, dude. They're this close to outsourcing back office to Guam.
Another great part is when you're supposed to assassinate the CEO of the company. If you fail to do the mission and the bomb telephone won't explode, the CEO will get extremely angry. He will throw the phone down in range and enrage and announce that he will just fire all of the people responsible and everyone that just happens to be there as well. And sort of shows up the true nature behind his trendy office and all of that.
But trust me, it's worth it. And don't worry, I will fire several people for this.
Another great aspect of the toxic work culture that you can see, there's a conversation if you don't do what you're supposed to do and just eavesdrop to it. The job interview, the woman will say a new guy to sit down on a beanie guy, something about, "Oh, we're comfortable here." But he tells her that his bag hurts, he doesn't want to sit on the beanie bag, and she just tells him passively aggressively, "It's not really a choice, just sit down and do it." Maybe it's a good example of how you can have a lot of forced team building activities in the workplace and all of that, which on the paper it can sound fun to have team building activities, but in practice it can be very degrading if you're forced to do team building activities such as this. There's another part where on the interview they tell him to play air guitar. He obviously doesn't want to, he thinks it's stupid, but basically he's forced to do it. Even though the interviewer is just pretending to be trendy and fun and all of that, but in truth he's basically forced to do what the corporate culture tells him to do. These sort of activities can be very degrading if you're forced to do it. Like I remember there's very great videos where like on the internet where like store clerks are forced to dance before they have to work at the store. Like, of course, in theory, it's not bad if they dance around a bit and have fun, but because they're forced to do it, it's, we can just see on their expressions that they're not enjoying it one bit. They're not feeling it.
Guys must be watching Family Guy.
This part of the game is actually a very good satire of what the philosopher Slavoj Žižek calls the postmodern boss.
Power functions only insofar as it mocks itself. We thus get the figure of a master who rules through a display of his castration. A master who claims he is our pal, who renounces his insignia, he presents himself as our equal friend, while retaining all his authority, with the help of this very self-debasement.
So another really cool part of the game that I found was drugs. It was a neat little moment about legalization of drugs. So while playing the game, the player will often meet a stranger who's collecting signatures for drug legalization. Usually the protagonist will talk to him, he'll take a joint, and it's going to be a hallucinating minigame. However, when the person uncovers Trevor, Trevor will refuse to sign the petition. He will tell him that, like, what the heck is wrong with you? I make thousands of dollars by selling illegal drugs. Why would I want to legalize it?
Legalize smoke? Yeah. You fucking kidding me? I make a shitload of money selling that, all right? The last thing I can handle is legalization. Now fuck off!
Take a drag.
No, I don't smoke it anymore. It interferes with the speed.
No, it's really good weed.
All right, give it here.
And it's a very nice little nudge at the fact that criminalization of drugs, and especially the drug war in America, the way it's waged, just doesn't work. It doesn't actually stop people from buying drugs, and in reality it results in an illegal black market that causes tons of its own problems. Also, I think another little interesting fact is that marijuana doesn't really have a hallucinatory effect, so it means that the stranger is giving you some sort of spiked weed with some other substances in it that cause hallucination and paranoia, and I think it's another great nudge. It's sort of like, look, like that's the problem with illegal stuff, because it can have other even more harmful substances, for example. But by far the most controversial that made appearances in most of the media was the game's torture scene. In the chapter by the book, Trevor is tasked to torture a person in order to get information out about some criminal. The scene is incredibly gruesome, and it's also interactive. You are the torturer, you are performing torturing here. You're supposed to. You're not able to win the game if you don't perform torture. And I have to say, the voice acting of the tortured man is very well done. It really is actor grade, which it makes it so much more immersive in the game. Basically, the reason they included this gruesome scene was to be a social critic of the US government. So the torture that the government does. The CIA and other branches of the US military actively use methods of torture, and they even have politically correct term for it. It's called enhanced interrogation technique. So this way it doesn't sound as horrible. There's even a nice reference to CIA claiming that waterboarding, which means drowning a person with water for a very long period, is legal and not really torture. When Trevor will do it and will torture a person with water canister, it's going to he comments how it's legal anyway, and there's even an achievement in game titled "It's legal," so it sort of nudges at that very horrible part.
Nothing to complain about here, pal. This is totally legit. They'll be doing this shit at elementary schools in no time. It's legal, bro. Legal.
I find it very interesting how this part of the game has been criticized by many media outlets for being too gruesome or simply going too far. I find the media backlash to be very interesting, because the narrative is that they understand that it's supposed to be a satire, but they think that the game just went too far. And I think it's very interesting how the media and the people in general, they're going to be so disgusted by being confronted by this in a video game, but they're not going to really care all that much as long as it's hidden from the public eye and all of that.
I work for the forces of sanity.
Sanity?
And we need you to tell the world what happened to you, from the safety of a foreign country, preferably a dictatorship.
What do you mean?
You've got a message. You are a message.
Another nice part that they touch upon is private armies. Private security firms and literally armies are also in the game. We have Merryweather, which is a private security military contractor company. It's based on real-life Blackwater that recently renamed to Academy, because I guess Academy doesn't sound as bad as Blackwater, but to put it blatantly, these are some of the biggest scum on Earth. They basically profit by selling weapons, providing mercenaries. They're privately owned and they work for profit of a small group of businessmen, and at the same time they also live off public money of the government because they have a lot of contracts with the government, and they're often also overcharging the government, making millions of dollars in profit and not even delivering a functional profit in the end. So that's a whole field for itself.
You heard of Merryweather?
Yeah, maybe.
Merryweather Security Consulting, the company our government uses to fight its wars and protect its shady interests all over the planet.
They're the army?
They're like the army, only they're private, so they cost more.
Merryweather is also selling guns to civilian populations, so the gun culture, especially industry side of it, is also satirized in the game quite a lot, and there's a lot of in-game commercials which poke fun of some of the things that I mentioned before. So political commentary is also expressed in the game quite a lot, mostly by the in-game radio you can listen while driving a car, and TV programs when you can watch TV.
Governor, I hate immigrants, the crippled. I can't stand unions, cops, old ladies. The thing is, at least you know I'm a dick.
I really didn't expect Rockstar to dabble into gaming culture. So Michael's son Jimmy, he is a caricature of a game addict. He's an obese, shut-in loser, never had a job in his life. He just slouches on his bed and he eats pizza. Here, interestingly enough, we have Rockstar making fun of its own audience.
Firstly, I'm a fat shit that you ruined. And secondly, I will get a job and I will stop smoking pot in that sort of way, okay?
I love you too, son. Now, go. Get a job, because I don't have the money to buy you a car.
Jimmy's playing a shooter game, and it's basically like a normal first-person shooter, but the gore and the blood is just exaggerated by 1000%. In this way, it really makes fun of the game, basically using violence as sort of a selling point. But if you really think about what it is, it's just kind of weird if you really think about it. Which is also funny, because the GTA is the kind of game which has excessive violence, often very extreme violence that's just unnecessary. It's funny how Rockstar satirizes itself and its own audience here. Okay, that was quite a lot. But basically, to conclude it, I just wanted to point out some of these moments. The whole game is one big satire. I liked it a lot. I can't really say that it's high art genius. It's basically sort of on a level that you would expect out of a Hollywood movie, which is actually very good for video games, because I think that video games mostly have failed to really reach film-like, development of characters and all of that. I mean, it partially makes sense because it's a different medium, it's not like a film, but in a way it's also a shame that the format of a video game hasn't really been able to achieve its full potential quite yet. So there's a lot of way for game developers to improve on this. But overall, the entire thing is a big satire of American society. So as far as the ending goes of the game, Michael will end up being on better terms with his family, so that's nice. Trevor won't change much, but I like how Franklin, maybe he has like the saddest ending. Franklin sort of manages to achieve his dream. So by doing crime, he became very rich. He has a nice house in the rich part of the city with a beautiful view, with a pool. Sort of like the dream that he wanted to achieve. He no longer has to live in the ghetto with his aunt in his child room. He has a huge mansion now and all of that. But I like how it made his relationships deteriorate. He had a love interest in the game, but as the game goes, he completely loses touch with her because he's basically doing his crime stuff and it completely alienates her. And she eventually gets with someone else and she gets married, and I think the game sort of hints that his ending is a bit like Michael, with not being able to have good relationships and all of that, but hopefully for him he'll be able to sort this out. So this was quite a lot. I hope I'll be able to edit this in some way to make it listenable. Thank you for listening to my ramblings about it. I don't know, it just really surprised me. I wasn't expected to have a great satire like that. For what I know, I haven't played the older installments, but for what I know, other installments were also a lot like this. But I think this one really took it to a next level, and especially maybe like the finance stuff and corporate culture. That was quite interesting, so have a good time.
You are a hipster. What? You're a hipster. I hate hipsters. Classic hipster denial.
I abhor
hipsters. I eat them for fun. Hipsters love saying they hate hipsters.